Welcome back to the Inquisitive Traveler. This is segment 2 of our trip to New Orleans, and I would like to add a little piece more of North Carolina. I just want to make sure that you guys know how to reach us. You can reach us at inquisitivetraveler@yahoo.com, or you can Twitter us at inquisitive_tra3. At inquisitive tra3. So our journey continues. Now we are in North Carolina. We have left Louisiana and have journeyed through another trip to a southern state, and this state is North Carolina. Welcome. My name is Dion Carr. Today we'll discuss our journey to one of the nicest and cleanest and refreshing state called North Carolina. A state with some really troubled history, but nevertheless rather clean and friendly to us while we were there. We traveled and looked for different areas to see, to learn, different plantations, and we came across a few. I won't name the names, but we'll talk about these plantations. Went to 2 plantations, huge properties with massive houses, and learned about where the slaves slept, how they worked the land. And I must say, that must have been really difficult times because the sun was extremely hot at the time and a little bit unbearable, and I just don't know how they really did it. We ran across the name Harriet Tubman, that she was passed through there from her journey seeking and helping slaves to Canada. Why Canada? Canada was the most safest and freest part of the nation at the time. So I'll leave this little piece. I'll let Michelle tell you about how she felt about the journey. Michelle?
Hey Dion, how are you today?
I'm good, Michelle. Thanks for stopping by. Well, let me not even say stopping by. This is our home studio, and we're here talking about our trip to the Carolinas and how we bumped into Harriet Tubman during our trip.
Okay, so initially when I thought about going to South Carolina, I was thinking about the food, actually.
Yeah, me too.
So, and I always wanted to have a historical component to when I go on vacation, especially going to the southern states, because there is that history for African Americans. So we visited a plantation, and whenever I visit a plantation, I often feel the spirits of those people and try to think about how it would have been for them and how privileged we are today and how much we take for granted.
And I was recently just talking about how hot it was, and we always talk about that we couldn't possibly work in those plantations and cut cane or, work on the cotton fields and, having minimal water to drink. So I really have to hope that our young people look at these things and really think about their futures when it comes to this.
One of the unfortunate things also is whenever we do go on these tours or visit plantation or historically black monuments, we are one of the few people of color that's there.
Yeah, we usually go on tours, and it's maybe out of 25 people, we're number 4. Usually another family or another couple and us.
Right. And when you have the conversation with the individuals that run the organization, they often tell us that most of their funding comes from white counterparts. You know, there are a lot of the black institutions are not supported or funded by people of color, which is very disappointing to hear.
Very unfortunate. And we were talking about Louisiana in a previous podcast and how poor the state is and sad the state is. Remember when we saw those children running around without shoes and the dog in the neighborhood?
Yeah. I thought I was like in a third world country. You wouldn't have realized that this was the United States, you know, the great America, and how often we do look down upon people that come from other countries. And, you know, just to think about what is going on within the United States sometimes is very disturbing.
All right. So let's talk about Harriet and how we continue to bump on Harriet and in our travels. Everywhere we go recently, we run into Harriet. Well, I can't say that because a lot of times it is calculated. We have spent some time finding out where she went, and you know, we've been jumping all over the East Coast with sometimes with no rhyme or reason. It's just the next trip and finding out where she is, and we decided to make sure that we spend some time making this a journey and a learning experience.
Yeah, and also to make it fun, you know, because sometimes going back to the past and, you know, the experience of those of African descent, you know, it can be draining, you know, to hear about how they were treated. So, you know, we do try to have that balance where, you know, there is a learning component to our vacations, but also we want to have some fun.
So, Michelle, I had lots of fun with those trips. And, you know, I know we're going back and forth, and there's no real rhyme and reason to these first 2 podcasts, but we just want to document and chronicle the rest of it so people can understand that there's real history here in the United States, real history in the Caribbean. We actually went to the Caribbean and chronicled some parts of our slave heritage, because both of us are West Indian. You may not have been born in the West Indies, but you are definitely, your parents are West Indian, and my parents are West Indian, and I'm West Indian. And I find that this journey is rather fascinating and a real learning experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the difficult things I have a hard time with is when the separation between the West Indians and African Americans, because you and I have often discussed, like, you know, we all were on the same boat at one point. We just got dropped off at different locations. That's
a great point. And I try to educate people on that point many times, how we really could be cousins, you know, but very distant, because, you know, we were dropped off hundreds of years ago. But who's to know that our family members? So it's really a scary thing, and how our younger generation now are discriminating against themselves, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I can see from both ends. Like, sometimes I feel that the older generation can be show more discrimination to those individuals or groups that are not from the same ethnicity or group as them. But I think with social media and people being exposed to different cultures, I think that's going to change, right? I mean, I remember coming here and I was told that I wasn't black, and I was very confused. You know, I came here from the UK, and in the UK, you're black or you white. There was no such thing as Jamaican or African American. You know, we were just all black at the end of the day. So it was very confusing to me. So that's why, you know, I feel like whenever I travel throughout the United States, I want to learn about black history, because that's a part of my history. Just because my family wasn't born here or I wasn't born here, I still feel like I have a strong connection, you know, to African American history.
Yes, and I even have a problem with that term, African American. I think we are all of African descent, and we have traveled throughout the world, but we are all of African descent. When we start to separate African American, African, whatever it is, we start separating from each other, and that's where we begin the separation. But during our next podcast, we'll talk more about Harriet Tubman and Harriet Tubman's journey and what we've learned. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome, Dion. See you later.
See ya.